Next presentation is going to be from a different perspective. General Ulmer was Army, and he was on the ground at Anlock and a lot of other places, I'm sure. And he's going to tell us about that. No pictures, so just relax and listen to him. He knows that briefing pilots is the same way you brief infantrymen. You change the pictures when their lips stop moving. So he's not going to have that visual aid today, so he's just going to talk to you, so stay awake. Okay, we'll get that. Hold it up.
Okay. Can you turn the volume up just a little bit, please? Can you hear me now in the back row? Do you really care? Well, my name's Walt Ulmer, and I spent 37 years in Army uniform, and I'm honored to be here today, to tell you the truth. And I may forget this later on, so I want to be sure that you hear it now. I want to thank all of you, collectively all of you and all of the other facts and the other folks who were doing the great job, for giving me a present. And the present is about 34 years and 4 months of life. Since about the middle of June of 1972, had there been any lessening in the air support, there is no doubt that all of us in Anlock in the battle would not have been here anymore. And so you've given me a true lease on life, and I appreciate that. The other day I was giving a talk to a bunch of high school students, and I was trying to sort of get with them and said, you know, when I was going to high school, we had a little war going on too. And I said, as a matter of fact, we were excited because the president was coming to our town to pay us a visit. But at the last minute, he had an important talk up in Pennsylvania, and so we had to cancel. And actually, Mrs. Lincoln wasn't feeling well either. Let me tell you, there wasn't a laugh in the room. I don't tell that story anymore. Once upon a time back in 1972, I'm on the faculty of the Army War College. But I decided it was probably time for me to go back to a second tour in Vietnam for a whole bunch of different reasons, and so I went. And there I am, and it's now the 8th of May of 1972, and I'm arriving in Saigon. I'm just a lieutenant colonel. I'm on the promotion list to colonel, but I'm just a lieutenant colonel, and I was amazed that when the plane landed, someone came up and said, "Are you Colonel Ulmer?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Well, sir, why don't you come down here? We have a helicopter." I said, "You have a what?" He says, "We got a helicopter, and where are your baggage?" Well, you know, I thought this was a pretty good deal here. Plain old lieutenant colonel, and he gets met right at the Saigon terminal. I said, that's pretty good. So then they took me up to brief me in Lai Khe and in the headquarters there. And I found out that there was going to be a change of command in the middle of the Battle of Anlock on the morning of the 10th of May. And I was the new guy on the block. Now, for those probably just a few in the audience who don't recall that in the spring of 1972, 12 North Vietnamese divisions crossed the border and came down. There was one major attack up in the north where some of you were, and there was another major attack that was going around, swinging in and coming in down towards Saigon and down through the provincial capital of Anlock. It was a big operation. The president of Vietnam then, Thieu, knowing that the North Vietnamese, for some reason or other, wanted to come right down through Anlock and right down to Saigon, said, "We will defend Anlock to the death." Well, that did a couple of things. It told the people, I guess, in Anlock that they were going to be there for sure, and it also told the North Vietnamese that we're going to take Anlock. So that was an interesting kind of a battle. It's now the morning of the 10th of May, and well, actually, on the 9th of May, another exciting thing. Again, I'm just going up the road 20 clicks from Lai Khe, but I got a brigadier general by the name of Hamlet and 3 other colonels, and they got briefing charts, and they're going to talk to me about how I'm going to get in the helicopter and go up to Anlock, which I thought was interesting also. And they talked that we're going to have gunships, and we're going to have medevacs, and we're going to have all this stuff. And I thought that I was tired, and I'd just come from the Army War College, and I was just kind of generally confused, and I'd been briefed and so forth. So in any case, at 5:30 in the morning we take off, and we're running up north right over the tops of the rubber trees. And I don't know a hell of a lot about piloting, but I do know as I'm looking up there and I see that the airspeed indicator is way over in the red, I knew we were really scooting up the thing pretty well. So we landed on the pad in Anlock, and as soon as we landed, so did the incoming. Colonel Miller, great guy who I was replacing, dove in on the stomach from the other side, and I got out to one side, and the helicopter was on the ground about 18 or 20 seconds. It took off, got shot at in the back on the way out, made it home, and that was the change of command in Anlock. And I fell down the bunker steps, and there at the bottom of the bunker steps is my West Point classmate, a guy by the name of Art Taylor. And I said, "Art, what are you doing here?" He says, "Well, I don't know, but he says we're here." So we were there. So then I'm now able to take transportation to go from the helicopter pad down to the middle of Anlock. At that particular time, the perimeter in Anlock was about 1.1 kilometers long and anywhere from 200 meters to a half a kilometer wide. And within that were about 8,000 South Vietnamese troops, about 2,000 civilians, about 10 or 12 Americans, and about 1,300 wounded soldiers who could not be evacuated. The major thing started in about the 15th or so of April, and I got in the middle on the 10th of May. One of the things that General Hollingsworth did not tell me was that he knew pretty well that on the 11th of May, Anlock was going to have the major attack of the war. Now, historian Douglas Pike said that this was the most significant single battle of the entire war in Southeast Asia. I don't know whether that's true or not, and from my perspective in the foxhole, and I'm going to tell you a few stories about, that was sort of irrelevant. It was a big enough battle for us and for all those of you who were helping us, and for those who were shot down over that particular city. A couple of quick things first. Where we lived and where we were. Anyway, I took transportation, which was a Jeep. They only had one Jeep that was moving. It had 2 flat tires and 2 tires that were okay. And we rumbled down about a half a mile to the center of the city, where we lived in the bottom of a Frenchman's wine cellar. And thank God that this guy was a wine drinker, because it was a big, huge, as a matter of fact, this wine cellar was about as long as this stage. It was just about over to here in terms of its width, and it was about 8 feet high. And on top of that, they had piled sandbags and pierced steel plank and more sandbags and wood and all other kind of stuff. We had about a 6 or 8 foot roof on the top of this thing, and that's where we lived. I came into Anlock at 6 o'clock on the 10th of May, and I left Anlock at 1300 hours on the 12th of July. So for 62 days, we had our friendly group of 4 Americans and about 15 of the Vietnamese division staff that we were advising and helping and so forth in this little affair. Now, there are some great advantages in terms of being surrounded, as you know. First, you may fire in any direction. Secondly, the targets are really, there's just a lot of them. Although late in the campaign, we had a fax saying, this is, I'm not sure, Chico or Rash or Sundog. He says, I got 4 fast movers coming in from the carrier. They don't have much gas. Need a target over. Well, we sat down at this little card table. The division commander sat here, and I sat there, and we kind of ran the miscellaneous part of the stuff from there, and we had our map down there. And the truth was, at that moment, believe it or not, we didn't really have a good target. Now, about every 10 days, they got a volunteer helicopter crew from Lai, and they would come up and bring us our new CEOI and the passwords and the call signs and our mail and a few other miscellaneous groceries and so forth. And they also brought us some other little stuff like M&Ms, and so I had a little package of M&Ms. And a red M&M fell down onto the map. And I says to the Vietnamese division commander, I says, and he says, yeah, go. So I said, "Oh, Roger, we have suspected enemy location at Charlie Tango 6942, 3-4-71. Over." He says, "Oh, Roger." And so the planes come in, and they hit this target, and there is the biggest damn secondary explosion I ever saw in my military career. It just went up, boom. We'd obviously hit one of their damn ammo supply points, just a couple of 3 or 4 clicks outside the wire. And the fact says, "Oh, Roger," he says, "I don't know how the hell you guys do it down there, but you're a really bunch of pros, over." I said, "Oh, Roger, it's just in a day's work, over." Anlock was supplied by air. It was basically protected by forward air controllers. On the 10th and 11th and 12th of May, we put in over this very small area 297 sorties of TAC air. The average for the next 30 days was 260 per day. And that's probably why we had to have 2 or 3 of you folks flying around telling us what to do. It was just an extraordinary kind of thing. In addition, we had other stuff going on. We were all totally supplied by air. Earlier, they were using regular parachute drops, but then, as you know, when they brought in the 20 and 30 millimeter anti-aircraft, and then early in May, the SA-7s, everybody is now moving up above 10,000 feet. Well, when you take a regular parachute and you drop the load at 10,000 feet, and there's a slight wind blowing, and you only got a couple kilometers here, an awful lot of our stuff was going out to the bad guys. As a matter of fact, we captured one North Vietnamese soldier, and when offered a cigarette, he said, "No, but I would like some of that canned fruit." Since he had been, about half of our stuff was floating out to the North Vietnamese Army. So in any case, our Air Force and some other smart people decided we needed high-velocity chutes that they could drop the rice and the ammunition and all of the other kind of stuff down to us. And that was pretty good. Most of them then stayed inside. And one of our brave American advisors then would say, "Okay, bring her next pass, come 300 clicks to the west, or 200 yards to the right, or whatever." And then we figured out that we had better tell them to drop the rice first and the ammunition second. Because if you adjusted the rice, it's a little easier than losing the ammunition the first time it goes in the other direction. Now, for some reason or other, a logistician back in Saigon or God knows where decided that during the Battle of Anlock we needed 40 millimeter tear gas grenades for the 40 millimeter launchers that we have. The answer to your question is I haven't the vaguest idea either. We had nothing to do with it, with tear gas and all of that stuff. But in any case, from 10,000 feet they dropped us a pallet of tear gas. The chute did not open. It landed, it was a really good shot. It landed about 10 feet outside of our bunker. I can hear the clunk now. It is really big. Now, we're down underneath, and this guy's wine cellar has got small windows up on the top. And we look up, not knowing what was in the package, and now there is a blue-green waterfall that is starting to come down out of the window, and we said, "Good God, that's gas. We got to get our gas masks." Now, gas masks, where might be gas masks? Well, I remember where, I don't know why we got them, but we got them and they're in a wooden footlocker. And the wooden footlocker is right there, and sitting on the top of the wooden footlocker is a metal chair, and in the metal chair is Major Hank Ruiz, a former football player who weighs about 240 pounds. And he's on top, and now he's busy talking to one of you guys. And we're always putting in airstrikes. There's always things coming out and going in. By the way, during these days, there was an incoming round at Anlock on the average of one every 5 seconds, so that you could not distinguish They were so close. I don't know who was counting. Someone supposedly was counting. But in any case, all of this is going on. We said, Hank, we got to get up. We got to get, well, the way his radio was, Hank really couldn't get up and do very much. So what we had to do is two of us tried to lift the top of this wooden footlocker, and we lifted it up, and it is so funny and stupid that we now start to laugh. And of course, when you're laughing, we would then drop the top of the footlocker. In the meantime, the gas is coming closer and closer. Well, anyway, we finally got the gas masks on. Now I'm talking to the fact. Over. This is Chico 2-1. Speak up down there, over. We got the gas mask. You said you got a gas mask. What are you doing with? We got a gas mask. Well, speak up through the gas mask. Over. We can't speak up because the gas is here and we take the gas mask. But listen, I'm going to shout loud. Over. Well, anyway, this went on for a little while. We got it all straightened out, but it was one of those moments. And someone has said before that, you know, there are some strange, joyful or cheerful or funny or whatever stuff in the middle of all kinds of havoc. And the great gas mask exercise is one. The amazing thing I think about Anlock was the remarkable, there was a lot of professionalism, but the trust and the exchange between us down in the hole and you guys who were flying up around, and two of you were shot down over Anlock in a very small period of time. It was a remarkable kind of thing. It was more than a professional event. It was more than an event of mutual trust. It was just something that people who have not been involved in that kind of a relationship and who have not done the things that you have done can't quite understand. Finally, the perimeter started moving out, and things finally got a little bit better. I was mentioning when some of the facts came to our reunion of the advisory group who was in Anlock that I didn't recognize until I started talking about this again, and I was just mentioning it here just a few minutes ago, the extraordinary feeling of loneliness when the facts left at the end of the day, where we would have 2 or 3, and some would have to move back up into Cambodia, and some went home, and some I'm not sure what, but when you had 3 people you were talking to, who were sometimes telling you the baseball scores, and then one guy used to read us the funny papers, and all of them used to tell us about events and things that are going on. For a good part of that time, we were pretty well convinced that we were never going to leave Anlock. And on the night of the 11th to 12th of May, we started to destroy codes and pictures and photographs and all that stuff. And we decided we would go out and probably kill a tank on the way. Now, we had these new little grenade launchers, the light anti-tank weapons, but we'd never used one before. And things were sort of crappy at that particular moment, and we decided we needed, just so that the generator, they were always knocking, of course, the generators out, and the lights was out on the top, and the commo was out, and the only reliable communication was between us and the fax. That we could communicate with. The rest of the world we often couldn't. So when the lights went up and we took a flashlight, and now we're starting to read the instructions about how you use this anti-tank weapon. And I said, boy, back at the War College, if I had spent less time on international diplomacy and more times on anti-tank weapons, we'd be in better shape right here. Well, we didn't use one at that moment, and we did survive, and everything was good. And the other interesting thing about your world in the military is that when I came in to Anlock on the morning of the 10th of May of 1972 to take command of that operation, none of the other 3 Americans in there had ever heard of me before, and I'd never heard of them. But right in the middle of all that stuff, they helped, and we just moved on, and they had confidence in me, and I had confidence in them, and I knew they knew their business, and they assumed I did, and God, it was a remarkable transition. I spent a lot of the last 15 years of my life in management consulting and leadership education and so forth, and I just tell you, what you've already learned now post-military, that kind of instant trust and mutual acceptance of culture is unfortunately a very rare thing. And what you and I have experienced, and what the people here talking about their World War II and Korean experiences and so forth have experienced, is unfortunately not universally understood. It's too bad that almost everyone doesn't have some sort of an experience such as you have had, or I have had, or others have had. I think it appreciates over time, and I think it enhances your appreciation over time. When historians a couple hundred years from now look back on this particular era, they're going to have an awful lot of stuff to think about. My real feeling is that they're going to say that in that time of turmoil and disarray, how did they ever get a group of people to dedicate their lives to folks that they didn't even know, who coming from all over this great country could come together and do remarkable things for freedom and for the future. I think that history is going to talk about that kind of stuff, and I hope that you recognize the extraordinary contribution that you've made and the contribution that you're going to continue to make by representing some fundamental values to America. I have said, probably from a very myopic and small point of view, if all of the decision makers in Washington had the same kind of physical and moral courage of the people who were flying and fighting around Vietnam, I think that we'd have an even better country than we have today. But I'm optimistic about the future. I just feel greatly honored to have been able to spend some time with you. I thank you again for saving an awful lot of things, including me, and I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir.